Hello, dear friend. Thursday, July the 6th, 26 degrees Celsius. Beautiful summer day here. 2023, Thursday, July the 6th. And how are you doing today? I hope you're doing well. I wanted to share with you quickly this amazing little book that I found at the thrift shop. And I kind of jumped around in it. I read the first two chapters and also the chapter I couldn't resist because it was called The Argument from Design. This guy is a Freeman Dyson, his name is, a highly decorated scientist who's got many mathematical discoveries named after him and principles and scientific riddles and mathematical riddles named after him and all that kind of stuff. He lived to his 90s and he had a distinguished academic career and was involved in all kinds of scientific research, which I'm not going to really go into here. But I want to share with you something that jumped out at me from chapter 23, which also relates to the first chapter where he talks about this idea of cosmic unity. And we're just jumping from, remember we talked about this guy, Michael Buchanan, and others like him, like Karl Marx and others like that were so mesmerized by Darwin. Darwin became their religion, right? And these 18th century, 19th century thinkers who said science is everything. Oh, science is so important. There is no room for any faith or anything like that. It's all science. It's only what you can see. Materialists, right? Anything to do with metaphysical ideas, they threw it out. They said, no, it's all just science. Science. What you can measure, what you can see, taste, touch. There's nothing that in the unseen realm that we need to concern ourselves with. And everything is explainable by evolution. They went on and on with this, and it was picked up by a lot of intellectuals in Europe in the late 1800s and carried over, and it still carries over till today, where anything to do with theism is looked down upon and is, seen as intellectually inferior. Buchanan, for example, said it was only for the downtrodden and the uneducated that were willing to believe in God, or even, Marx, I believe, opiate of the masses, that kind of thing. It's kind of for the unwashed, this idea of religion and God and all that stuff. And they were superior because they were intellectual and they believed in Darwin and science. Well, this guy is a extremely distinguished scientist who was studying, mathematics and integrals from the time a child, and he spoke the same language as Einstein. He knew mathematics at a level that is so far beyond the average human being that there is no doubt that this guy is the scientist of scientists. He was at that level where scientists would look up to him. And so, and you can read his bio. Maybe I'll link to his bio, but just do a search on Freeman Dyson and look at his Wikipedia profile, and you'll see exactly what I mean. But let me share with you what he says, which is amazing because it's a little bit heavy, but if you listen closely, you'll get what he's saying. So I'd like to really share it with you because it is a little bit heavy, it's a little bit long, but let's just go from page 248. It's a chapter on the argument from design, and he essentially says, the science has come back to validate the argument from design, but because of the position that he's in, he can't call it God. He can't say that. But let me just share with what he says, and I think you'll realize how important this is. Here we go. So for the biologists, every step down in size was a step toward increasingly simple and mechanical behavior. Size in terms of physical size. A bacterium is more mechanical than a frog, and a DNA molecule is more mechanical than a bacterium. But 20th century physics has shown that further reductions in size have an opposite effect. If we divide a DNA molecule into its component atoms, the atoms behave less mechanically than the molecule. If we divide an atom into nucleus and electrons, the electrons are less mechanical than the atom. There is a famous experiment originally suggested by Einstein, Podolsky, and Rosen in 1935 as a thought experiment to illustrate the difficulties of quantum theory. I'm going through this a little quick because you can slow it down if you need to, which demonstrates that the notion of an electron existing in an objective state independent of the experimenter is untenable. The experiment has been done in various ways with various kinds of particles, and the results show clearly that the state of a particle has a meaning only when a precise procedure for observing the state is prescribed. Has a meaning only when the precise procedure for observing the state is prescribed. Among physicists, there are many different philosophical viewpoints and many different ways of interpreting the role of the observer in the description of subatomic processes, but all physicists agree with the experimental facts, which makes it hopeless to look for a description independent of the mode of observation. When we're dealing with things as small as atoms and electrons, the observer or experimenter cannot be excluded from the description of nature. In this domain, Monad's dogma, and here it comes up here, the cornerstone of the scientific method is the postulate that nature is objective, turns out to be untrue. In other words, nature is subjective. The characteristics of nature at the subatomic level are dependent upon the observer and cannot be separated from the characteristics of the observer, or the measurement becomes untenable, becomes nonsensical. If we deny Monad's postulate, this does not mean that we deny the achievements of molecular biology or support the doctrines of Bishop Wilberforce. He's talking about this old Bishop Wilberforce was a theist that made fun of evolutionary theory, but he wasn't able to back it up with any strong logical arguments, and he ended up getting trashed by the scientific thinker of his day. But that's a whole other story. I don't want to get into that. We're not saying that chance and the mechanical rearrangement of molecules cannot turn ape into man. We're saying only that if, as physicists, we try to observe the finest detail, the behavior of a single molecule, the meaning of the words chance and mechanical will depend upon the way we make our observations. The laws of subatomic physics cannot even be formulated without some reference to the observer. Chance cannot be defined except as a measure of the observer's ignorance of the future. And here, listen, the laws leave a place for mind in the description of every molecule. That is powerful. And here he goes again. I do not feel like an alien in this universe. The more I examine the universe and study the details of its architecture, the more evidence I find that the universe, in some sense, must have known that we were coming. That's a very theistic principle that he's talking about here. And again, this should jump out at you, that the observer makes the measurement of reality at a subatomic level subjective. That is the key thing, right? He says some people say, oh, then you're an animist, and some scientists made fun of him for making those statements. He says, being a scientist trained in the habits of thought and language of the 20th century rather than the 18th, I do not claim that the architecture of the universe proves the existence of God. I claim only that the architecture of the universe is consistent with the hypothesis that mind plays an essential role in its functioning. Well, he essentially just said it. If mind plays an essential role in the functioning of the universe, it indicates the existence of God by inference, in my personal opinion. Now, he's saying he's not saying that because he's not allowed to say it, because he's a trained scientist living in the 20th century, and that's totally taboo to say such a thing. He said, we found earlier two levels on which mind manifests itself in the description of nature. On the level of subatomic physics, the observer is inextricably involved in the definition of the objects of his observations. That's repeating it in another way, right? On the level of direct human experience, we're aware of our own minds, and we find it convenient to believe that other human beings and animals have minds not altogether unlike our own. And he says we even found a third level to add to these two. The peculiar harmony between the structure of the universe and the needs of life and intelligence is a third manifestation of the importance of mind in the scheme of things. This is as far as we can go as scientists. We have evidence that mind is important on three levels, these three levels that he talks about. The examination of subatomic characteristics, the recognition that there are other minds similar to our own, and the peculiar harmony of the structure of the universe, allowing for the formation of mind in the first place, which he goes into a lot of detail about the perfect balance of observations and characteristics of subatomic observations that he is familiar with, which I'm not going to go into detail here because it gets a little heavy, right? I don't want to go overboard with it, but I just wanted to give you the essence of that particular chapter, chapter 23, and he brings it back to the conclusion with his idea of cosmic unity. And he developed that early in the book, in the first chapter, where he says that because he was born into such a privileged environment, he was part of, you could call it the aristocracy of England almost, where his parents were highly educated. He was on, to go to these private English schools and would end up going to Oxford and Cambridge and, the very upper crust of English society, I guess you could call it. And yet he was aware of people that would have been born in extreme destitute conditions. He gives one example of a child of a coal miner in one part of the world and a child growing up in a destitute area of India, I believe. So he gives these two different examples. And he comes up with this cosmic unity theory saying that there must be a balance that is independent of the circumstances of the individual. So it doesn't matter what conditions the person is born into. Their happiness, their fulfillment of life, their ability to experience life and gain from it must be equal to the wealth and the poor. And it's scriptural. It says that the wealth and the poor come together at death. And there is a harmony there and a balance there. I can't put it into the same way that he did, because people will say, oh no, life is unfair, it's chaotic, it's just random chance, and one person is born rich with a silver spoon in their mouth, another person is born destitute and poor and is going to live a wretched life. And he's saying, no, this is not true. The way that God created reality, and it comes back to his observations on subatomic level, that the experience of life is dependent upon the perception of the individual. And so, yes, of course, if you're born with handicap and you're born with pain, there needs to be an alleviation of that pain somehow. But in general, the idea of this cosmic unity that he talks about allowed him to reconcile the fact that he knew he was in a privileged position, but it allowed him to perceive the earth and reality as being fair in spite of that. That people that were born in less advantageous conditions would have other things to outweigh that, perhaps stronger family relations, perhaps a more pure enjoyment of the nature that they were in. Maybe, I don't know, he like I said, he was able to explain it better, but this was his, he liked to call it a cosmic unity that showed the universal love of God to all of humanity. And to look at things, it's the glass half full idea. Some people will look at something and say, oh, this is not fair. Some people say you got to look on the bright side, that, and in even above and beyond all that, of course, as believers, we have an extra level of a cosmic unity, if you want to call it that, in that there is a eternity to balance everything out. And we are giving many examples from Scripture that says, well done, good and faithful service. You were diligent with what you had available to you. Now you can enjoy even more. And there's this balancing out, right? The one that came and worked only for 1 hour ended up receiving as much as the one that worked a lot longer, but there was a reason behind it. There was a reason behind it. And even from John, I was reading earlier where he's saying that, others have worked and you're entered into their labor. So you get to benefit from previous generations. And the way that God has set up our reality and layered eternity on top of that, that everything will be perfectly balanced out in the long run, I guess you could say. And the whole idea of sowing and reaping, that God is perfectly just. We can't say, oh, if I was God, I'd do it like this. Or if I was God, I wouldn't allow all this suffering in the world. No, God is the potter. We are the clay. He has made the reality that we experience from a perspective of perfect justice, perfect knowledge, perfect power. And it is our job to see through the illusions of injustice and say that the people we pity in this life, we may envy in the next. You see what I'm saying? We think, oh, life is unfair and this is not good and there's all this evil and all this pain and sorrow and all that. Well, no, that's not the right way to look at it. The right way to look at it is to say God is perfectly just, God is in control, entrust our souls to Him, and look for ways to improve our reality. Look for ways to serve people around us. Look for ways to be a blessing to the people that we meet in our lives, whether it's family, close friends, or even strangers, or even enemies, right? We got to find a way to bless. So anyway, I think you know where I'm going with all that, but this is very excellent. Very much the gentleman that wrote this was leaning towards his mind and his heart and his spirit were open to theistic ideas. I don't know if he was a Christian per se, but definitely I would say very much theistic in comparison to someone like this who just hated God with every ounce of his being and was a very nasty, vile person full of hatred. So there's that. So I'm really looking forward to getting through more of this. I've only read the first couple of chapters, and I skipped ahead and I read chapter 23. I cheated. So, but I'm looking forward to going through each and every one of these chapters because it's extremely friendly to somebody without a understanding of science. You don't have to be a scientist to read it. It's very friendly written, and so entertaining to read, enjoyable to read, and just like having a good meal of good food. This, on the other hand, this is like trying to eat poison. It's horrible. So you don't want to read this. This, if you see something like this, excellent, very encouraging, very eye-opening. It does get a little bit heavy at times, but mostly very, very lucid and understandable for somebody who's not a scientist, such as myself. And I'm getting a lot out of it. So I can't wait to get through more of it. And if there's more stuff that jumps out at it, from it, I will definitely make additional videos for you on that. So thank you so much for watching. God bless you. I love you very much. I hope you're having a great day. And yeah, I'm looking forward to getting through that. I try and spend a couple hours a day between here and there, and early in the morning or late at night when I can't sleep. It's some of the best times to read. So God bless you. I love you very much. Have yourself a wonderful day. Get lots of fresh air. We'll talk to you again real soon, okay? Bye-bye now. Be good. Talk to you later.